Make sure to check us out on Letterboxd for written reviews.
for films that we've done not only on the podcast, but outside of the podcast too.
Links in the description below.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Rewatch podcast. My name is Samuel,
My name is Jaden.
and this is a podcast where we talk extensively about a certain film and then decide whether it deserves a rewatch from you. We're joined today by our Star Wars correspondent, Nicholas. Welcome to the show again.
Hello, thank you for having me.
So Nick was previously on for our
Rogue
Rogue One
One.
podcast, and it was quite a good podcast actually. It was a good chat. So
Jumping 80s.
yeah, so as anyone who has been following along the Star Wars podcast knows, we've been going through chronologically, and the last one we did was Return of the Jedi, and obviously Return of the Jedi is fantastic.
It's Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, fantastic film, but there was sort of like a bittersweetness to finishing that podcast because we knew what darkness lurked on the horizon.
And we're not talking about the First Order here. We're talking about metaphorically
Yes, we're
the
talking about
darkness
the
of the
sequel.
sequels.
Yeah, the sequel trilogy.
Yes.
So we make our first stop in the sequel trilogy today when we talk about what film, Jaden?
The Force Awakens. And I was thinking about this before. There's a lot of rising and awakening in the sequels. Like, just the titles don't make any sense to start with. Like, The Force Awakens in number 1, and then again in the third one, Skywalker Rises.
Yeah.
So it's like,
There's always something going on.
what's going on there?
And then the Last Jedi just sort of sticks out like a sore thumb there.
Yeah.
But then again, so does like the actual plot of the movie as well. So I guess it's kind of fitting. But yeah, so we are going into the sequel trilogy. I want to start us off by just gauging what we thought of this movie when we first saw it in 2015. As a Star Wars fan, we're all Star Wars fans here.
Yep.
What did we think when we walked out of that theatre when we would have been 13, 14, all of us? What did we think? Nick, what did you think?
I loved it.
Yep.
Honestly, it was just a modern Star Wars movie. That's all I saw it as. Just something amazing.
And it was fantastic.
Yep.
My naive young self just didn't see anything wrong with it.
Yeah, it's just something so special about seeing these new generation of characters in this world that we all really, really have a weird obsession with. I was a big fan of the prequels when I was young. The OG trilogy is where it was at for me.
Same.
So seeing these sort of legacy characters come back and reprise their roles was just so special to me. And I never really got that from any other movies. This was the first movie that I saw where I was man, I am so excited for the next one. My excitement was just through the roof. Endgame, nah. Force Awakens is where it was
Yeah,
at.
that's actually fair. I mean, you sort of forget the feeling of, of how hyped you were for The Force Awakens. So you can say I was so looking forward to Endgame. Or I was so looking forward to, Spider-Man No Way Home or something like that.
Yeah.
But the sheer and utter hype for The Force Awakens, I think it was greater than No Way Home. Because, that was obviously the most hyped movie that's ever been.
Yeah.
But I think The Force Awakens just had something special to it. You know, there was so much time had passed. No matter how old you were. I think, our dads would have been pretty excited about going to see this movie as well.
100%, yeah.
Everyone was sort of just looking forward to it, no matter how old you were. You know, everyone sort of knows what Star Wars is, and everyone was sort of looking forward to this movie. So, I mean, when we saw that first trailer, I mean, I remember watching it several times, just over and over and over again, and just, you know, the sheer volume of theories that arose. Who's Kylo Ren? Who's Snoke? Who's Rey? Who's anyone? What's Luke doing? What's Han doing? You know, it kind of broke YouTube for like a few years.
Yeah. Just
like the Star Wars Explained videos and all of that sort of stuff. So.
And then the potential went down the drain.
Yes, but I walked out of The Force Awakens thinking it was like the best movie ever. Like,
yeah,
it was
same.
It was definitely like my favorite movie of that year, and for many years after that, if you had asked me like what was my favorite film in 2016, I would have said The Force Awakens. So, and I think, you know, we probably all said that, right,
100%.
back in 2016.
Yeah.
Back then, I didn't even know what Marvel was.
Well,
yeah,
exactly.
I mean, that 2015 would have been
That was
Age of Ultron. Yeah.
Age of Ultron.
And so it wasn't really building steam then, I don't think. You know?
Well, you had Guardians, and
That's
Civil
true.
War was kind of the next year. But
Yeah. Civil War for me was when the MCU really started to build some sort of momentum.
It really solidified itself in the mainstream media. This kind of like it came out after Batman vs Superman, didn't it?
Oh, it's the same year. But it would have been slightly afterwards because Marvel only decided to do Civil War because of Batman v Superman. It was like a response.
Yeah,
but
and the fact that they were able to one up, you know, DC so hard is what really solidified them in so many people's minds.
No, I think that's where why are we talking about Marvel? I think that's where Marvel started becoming like an actual universe, like connectedness. Before that, it was just like a bunch of movies just kind of thrown together with this Marvel title on them.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then, I mean, The Force Awakens came along, and then obviously we had Rogue One the year after. And for me, I didn't really care about DC or Marvel. It was just only Star Wars. You know, it was only sort of after The Last Jedi, really, that I started taking a look at, you know, Marvel and the DC EU, sort of seeing what's happening there, because, you know, well, we all know what happened with The Last Jedi. Do you have the plot synopsis of The Force Awakens up there, or shall I read it?
If you've got it on hand.
Yeah, I'll read it. So, 30 years after defeating the Galactic...
30 years.
Yeah. 30 years after defeating the Galactic Empire, Han Solo and his allies face a new threat from the evil Kylo Ren and his army of stormtroopers. That's a pretty whack synopsis.
And his army of stormtroopers.
They might as well just be like his army of bad guys. Yeah. You know, they're not even called stormtroopers, are they? They're like...
No, they are.
They're First Order stormtroopers, but it's more so the fact that Kylo's not even sort of connected to the First Order. Like, he's more so just alongside with Snoke, and then Hux is in control of the First Order.
It's kind of like how Count Dooku was for the Separatists.
Yeah.
A bit more, not commanding them directly, but manipulating them.
Like, he's the face of the First Order, but he's not doing anything.
Right. Yeah, it's sort of like almost like a partnership or something.
Yeah.
It's like he's not the commander. He doesn't command the stormtroopers, but that's sort of Hux's job. But yeah, I mean, 30 years, I imagine that's sort of like a canonical time period between that universe and our world. That's sort of
It's essentially saying, like, okay, which age is going to work for Harrison Ford, Carrie Fisher, and Mark Hamill?
Exactly.
That's how long it's going to be.
Yeah. So we'll start a bit of a spoiler-free discussion at this stage, even though everyone's seen the movie, so they all know sort of how it ends, and, you know, more importantly, how some of these characters turn out.
Yep.
But we'll start it off with just some general discussion on, would we recommend this film to someone who has not seen it? And just take that question however you will. I'll start with you, Nick. What do you reckon? Would you recommend this to somebody?
No.
Why is that?
Oh, god damn. We don't get many of them.
just no.
End the comment.
Yeah. So why is that, Nick?
Well, one is because I know it comes after, and it depends depends really if they've seen the rest of the movies, which I assume they have.
Right.
Because there's no real reason to watch the rest of them.
I mean, who hasn't seen Star Wars?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's no real reason to continue watching them because they don't offer anything new to the story.
Yeah.
There's, like, ultimately, it's just a waste of time, and it could even ruin some aspects, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's almost like
Jump in there.
it's almost like a negative. It's like
It's almost like
Wait.
it subtracts from the experience.
is it possible to go backwards and not watch?
It's evolving just backwards.
Yeah. Let's get the more positive end of the spectrum. Jen, what are your thoughts?
Look, to the casual viewer, that's actually a really interesting question. I would probably stick to the original 6, because yeah, like you said, there's really no reason to finish with 8 and 9, in my opinion at least. The sequels are have a very split audience. I mean, a lot of people really, really like The Last Jedi. I think it's pretty universally decided that everyone hates The Rise of Skywalker. But it's sort of split down the middle with The Force Awakens as well. Look, I think it's just a fun sort of adventure movie, The Force Awakens, but again, so is A New Hope. So, I mean, if you're looking for answers from this movie, you're not going to get any, so why continue? But at the same time, like, it's just fun to me, so, yeah.
Let me change it up slightly then, because myself being a nerd, I've often been asked this question by people who have not sort of got any experience with the Star Wars franchise. If somebody was looking to get into Star Wars, would you recommend that they, what's the sort of viewing order? Not necessarily like, let's not have a discussion about which one you should watch first, but like, which ones should you watch?
Yep.
Should you watch the prequels, the originals, and then go on to the sequels? Or would you call it a day after the originals? Would you not watch the prequels? There's a lot of division over what's like the Star Wars, best possible viewing experience. Jaden, what are your thoughts?
I think for essentials, obviously the story's always been about Anakin Skywalker. That's always been the main character. I'd probably say prequels, Rogue One, OG trilogy is like the essentials of Star Wars. You could even probably drop Rogue One, but like you don't need Solo or Star Wars story, or the sequels. They don't add anything to what is the main story of Star Wars, which is Anakin Skywalker. Like, Darth Vader really has no presence in this movie whatsoever. So I'll probably say, OG trilogy. Prequels, OG trilogy.
Right.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts, Nick?
Yeah, honestly, because with both the trilogies, they spoil each other in the end. Like, the original trilogy obviously spoils the fate of, say, the Jedi, even the clones if you can pick it up, and generally the whole prequels, like where it all has to end. You know how it's going to end. Right. But then if you watch the the prequels first, then you obviously know some of the biggest reveals of the original trilogy, such as Vader being Luke's father, and all of the stuff.
That's a very good point.
So
you're getting a spoiler either way, aren't you?
Yeah, you don't know. Like, do you watch it the way they were released, or would you rather watch it in universe canonical order?
Yeah.
Because it's a tricky, because it feels like with the prequels they're not expecting that everyone who watches it have seen the original trilogy, which is actually pretty good. They're not expecting you to know exactly everything that's going to happen, so it can still provide a good experience if people watch the sequel trilogy first. But that's kind of the weird sort of end of it.
But would you recommend, say somebody is new to Star Wars and they watch the prequels and they watch the originals and then they say, should I watch the Force Awakens? Well, what would you say?
If anything, I'd say give it a go and see how you feel. Like, if you like it, then you'll have good luck with the Last Jedi.
It's like pushing them off the cliff. It's like, oh, okay, good luck.
You went there.
You started it yourself. But
That's your
ultimately,
decision.
Yeah.
ultimately, Force Awakens on its own is not a bad movie.
Yeah.
It's not. There's a lot worse ones out there.
Yeah.
But ultimately, knowing where it goes is what makes it worse, because there's just so much potential from that movie.
Yeah, that's the hard part of these movies is you tend to sort of rate or judge The Force Awakens on the movies that surround it. Like you've got arguably one of the best trilogies in cinema before it, the OG Star Wars trilogy, and then you've got arguably some of the worst movies ever made after it, Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker. And if they hadn't come out, would your opinion of this movie be different?
Imagine if, Star Wars like went bankrupt or something, or somebody blew up Lucasfilm HQ and we never got The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker. I think this movie would fare much better if those two did not exist. However, this movie is very much a setup movie.
Yeah.
It's not a, in my opinion anyway, it's not a conclusive like film in the same way something like Ford vs Ferrari is a conclusive film.
Shrek 2.
Shrek 2. I mean, it is a sequel. I do understand what you're saying. It's a conclusive film. It's not. You don't need to see the next one to find out who Shrek is. You know who Shrek is because you've watched that movie and it tells you about his character. Whereas this is very much, it very much puts the substance. It kicks it down the line. Kicks it down the road. It says we're going to give you, the basics here, and we're not going to make too many decisions that could, anger some people. We're just going to give you just the minimum that we can get away with to then hopefully sort of figure out what we're going to do from there.
And that was always the problem. They never had any plan. It was just, okay, we've got all of these characters. What are we going to do? Oh my God, we don't know what to do. Just do something in the meantime, make some money, and then down the road we'll figure it out. And that's ultimately where this whole franchise just went totally ballistic and blew up and just absolutely failed, which is sad.
What are your thoughts, Nick, on The Force Awakens and its sort of whether it stands alone or not?
Yeah. Alone, it struggled because when we watched it the first time, we had the excitement of finding out all these questions that were like all these like who are Rey's parents, why does she have the Force, all these sorts of like if you were on YouTube at any point between The Force Awakens and Last Jedi, it was all about who are Rey's parents, just constantly.
That's
all that
all you could like.
just that.
Who is Snoke and
or who are all these like. Just J.J. Abrams just chucking random stuff in there, like, we'll figure it out later.
Yeah, exactly.
And then Windu theories is
Oh yes, I remember watching that video.
Rey as a Kenobi, a Palpatine, a Skywalker, all these different things.
Yeah, Kenobi was the big one for sure.
Kenobi was huge,
especially with the I think that was because it's the mind trick mainly that Rey did.
Somehow. Yeah, which we had a chat about.
Yes.
Even though she had never seen anyone do it before.
I think in general, Star Wars is pretty face value. And when you start to, and that goes with every Star Wars movie, when you really start to look into it, issues start to appear. But this movie in particular has...
Well, this movie doesn't even try.
Yeah.
You can't sort of blame the prequels for not at least having a go. Mm-hmm. The problem with the prequels is that there's too much trying going on. There's almost too much effort going into, the story and what it's trying to do and the politics of everything. But what you can say about the prequels that you can't say about the sequels is that there is a vision to the prequels. And you can see that from The Phantom Menace. If you just watch The Phantom Menace, you can see, okay, that's Anakin Skywalker. That I have a feeling that Obi-Wan and Anakin Skywalker, this relationship's very important to what you know, how they end up in A New Hope. Whereas in this, you know, there's no, oh, I can see, you know, how Finn is so important to, you know, Rey's development, or, you know, how important Han Solo's, you know.
But they didn't have anything to build to. Like, the prequel trilogy had the original trilogy to build to. I'm not making excuses for the sequel trilogy here, because it had 3 movies to figure out what it was doing. But the prequel trilogy had the benefit of sort of slotting in place before the original trilogy.
Yeah, that's true.
This didn't really have anything.
Yeah. So it definitely needed to find out first what it wanted to do, because if you don't know what that third movie is, it's very difficult to, unless you're going to make the first movie an isolated adventure, like how A New Hope is very much one movie. And if there was no Star Wars after that, it would still very much work. And that's what, like, George Lucas thought he had to do, because there wasn't much funding. He said, okay, I'm going to have to do the Death Star, which I originally wanted to do in the third movie. I'm going to have to do that in the first movie because I need a conclusive big finale for the first movie. Because it might be the only one I ever do. There's none of that in The Force Awakens, because it doesn't really work on its own, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it's also because it knows it's going to get another movie.
Yeah.
Like, they've got the money, so they're going to do it.
Yeah, and that's why they don't bother answering those questions, I don't think.
And this is still one of the highest grossing movies of all time. I think it's like number 7 or something.
It's like at 2 billion, I think.
It's
just
huge.
over it.
Yeah.
I also think, though, that if the movie was just a blank screen, it would still gross that 2 billion. Like, you know, people are going to get their bums in there.
It's just
the name itself is what sold that movie.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure. So, when talking about sort of revisiting The Force Awakens, let's just get a quick sort of summary from the room of when we last saw this movie. Obviously, we just finished watching it, but before then, when was the last time you watched The Force Awakens, Nick?
I think it would have been a little bit after Last Jedi came out.
Right.
I went back to watch it, and I thought, yeah, this is definitely a lot better than The Last Jedi. Because that was sort of when I looked back on Last Jedi and was like, this movie's pretty not that good.
Yeah, because that took a while for a lot of people.
Yeah,
like,
it
for
was
me especially.
like when it first came out, it was pretty split. Like halfway down, like people who love it and people who hated it, and then it sort of slowly moved over to more and more people just despising what that movie represented. Yeah, and I think once I rewatched The Force Awakens, I actually realized how much potential they wasted with The Last Jedi. But I think after that, I didn't bother. And then I saw Rise of Skywalker and I was just like, time to watch Mandalorian again.
Honestly, yeah, I feel
that's interesting.
When I last watched this movie, it would have been before The Last Jedi, because I watched
There's no way.
No, 100%. And I own the Blu-ray, so I bought this movie, obviously in between 2015 and 2017. Absolutely loved this movie. Saw The Last Jedi. Saw it a few times because it took me, a few goes to calm down and, actually process it. And then, maybe watch one review that's like, The Last Jedi wasn't actually that good. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it actually wasn't that good.
Yeah.
Sometimes it just takes somebody else to just slap you in the face and be like, look at this, this is your hero. But so then after The Last Jedi, I just never felt the need to revisit The Force Awakens. It just never, I watched Rogue One probably 10 times since then.
Interesting.
But never went back to The Force Awakens.
Yeah.
The Last Jedi just, what was the point?
That's crazy. Yeah.
What about you, Jen?
I watch this movie every year. So I've probably seen it at least once a year, but I know I've watched it more than that since its release in 2015. I've probably seen it at least 10 times since 2015. So, I was quoting this movie throughout this watching. I know this movie back to front. Yeah, maybe it's just sort of a nostalgia thing for me.
Yeah.
I look back at 2015, I'm like, hell yeah, that was
Good
a great
times.
time.
Yeah.
So I just kind of associate good times with this movie and just, comfort. It's a fun movie to watch. But you know, I know it's not perfect. It's no Empire Strikes Back, but yeah, that's pretty much where I stand.
So in terms of the rewatchability of The Force Awakens, then is it worth going back to it several times? Does it sort of like get better as you revisit it, or does it sort of do the opposite?
I think the last time I watched this must have been about a year ago, and I think I enjoyed it more then. I don't know. It kind of stays where it is. I've got a pretty solid sort of rating of where this sort of stays.
Right.
But that's definitely biased. Like I know it's going to be a biased take. It's essentially just a New Hope with new characters. They played this so extremely safe. It's ridiculous. Copied Death Star. Copied farm boy person who becomes Jedi
On a desert.
on a desert.
Copy mentor figure getting stabbed.
Yeah. So it's just the New Hope.
Never caught on to that one.
Yeah, I didn't think of that one either. Yeah, so there's a lot of rinse and repeat going on. But in terms of rewatchability, I've kind of just sort of isolated this movie as its own thing. So if I'm gonna watch this movie, I'm not gonna watch The Last Jedi or Rise of Skywalker. Like I watched this movie because when I watch this movie, it takes me back to 2015.
Sure.
And when I watch The Last Jedi, it takes me back to 2017 or 2018, where it's like, hold up, I don't really want to go back to 2017. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a one-time watch for me.
Right. What are your thoughts, Nick, on like the rewatchability of The Force Awakens? Does it get better or worse for you the more times you watch it?
Compared to when I first saw it, it's nowhere near as good as I didn't enjoy it nearly as much. But it does have a lot going for it. Like, I think out of the entire sequel trilogy, it is the most visually sound. Like, it is. It has some of the best cinematography in the entire trilogy.
I agree.
Saying trilogy specifically because compared to Rogue One, it's not as good, but it's still very good.
Rogue One's fantastic.
Greg Fraser, man.
Yeah. Yep.
But, like, again, from a story perspective, once you catch on how similar it is to A New Hope, it's very hard to not focus on that. Like, every time you see, like, a scene that's pretty much from you, just like, that's all you can think about.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's the canteen scene, that's the Alderaan destruction scene, that's this.
Oh my god, it's literally the same thing.
It's just mixed around in different order.
Yeah.
If you submitted this as a university assignment, you would get flagged for plagiarism, I think.
Yeah, or you'd lose a lot of marks for half plagiarism.
Yeah.
That's insane.
But so what I think you're saying, Nick, is that if you turn your brain on while you're watching this movie, it's bad. But if
you're looking for those sorts of things, like if you're engaged with those kinds of criticisms against the movie, then you're very aware of, and you catch on to more and more things like that.
Yep.
Like, and it's very.
It's hard to sort of get out of that mind, I guess, is what you're saying.
Out of that like bubble of just comparing it to A New Hope.
Yeah. Sam and I like to have this conversation a lot because it always comes back to with movie watchings. It's whether you watch movies and just switch off and just watch a screen for 2 hours, or whether you actually want to invest yourself in the story and pay attention to what's going on. And to me personally, I think there's two different movies there. The Force Awakens kind of leans on the side of turn off your brain, have fun for 2 hours sort of thing. And then, you've got like Fincher's movies, like Prisoners, that is a lot more in depth. Yeah. Sorry. Oh my god.
I understand the confusion.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's sort of like, compare Spider-Man Homecoming to...
That's a better analogy.
Yeah, just something like...
Drive
Dark Knight.
2011.
Yeah, The Dark Knight's a good one.
Dark Knight.
Yeah, Drive 2011.
Batman.
Yeah, So I get what you're saying. It's it looks very good on the surface, but sort of if you dive deeper, it sort of
Starts to fall apart.
Yeah, it comes unraveled. Let's transition to the acting and the characters. We might spend a bit of time on this one.
Why don't we just go through and see our favourite character first?
Okay, who wants to start off? What's our favourite character from The Force Awakens? So in this movie, who's your favourite? Should we make it a new character or just any character?
Any character.
Because I doubt we'll have a conversation about the new characters then. That's the new thing. Anyway, who's your favourite character in The Force Awakens, Nick?
I'd honestly say Harrison Ford as Han Solo. He makes his scenes feel the most like an old Star Wars movie. The way he just delivers lines, like he's got the same charisma as his older, younger self. Like just not really caring, just like pretty much being over with everything, done with it, and then just and he delivers some of the best lines in the movie.
Yep.
But, yeah.
Completely agree.
Maybe we should do legacy character and
Yeah, okay. Let's just go around the room and say Han Solo, and then we'll have a conversation.
Well, the thing is, Han Solo just doesn't care in this movie. He's never cared about Star Wars since A New Hope. It just shows in all of his interviews. I mean, he says it himself. He just doesn't care.
I don't know, man. I think somewhere deep down, I think he probably cares really deeply. But I think he has this sort of like, I think he enjoys saying that he doesn't.
Yeah.
Like, I think he gets a lot out of just telling, this journalist who lives and breathes Star Wars that he just doesn't give a crap what a Force ghost is. I think he loves that.
Yeah.
But maybe he does hate it. Who knows?
I mean, it's not Harrison Ford's best performance ever. But you're right. It definitely feels the most like Star Wars in this movie. I also really like Adam Driver in this movie, as well as John Boyega. I think they both give really good performances. I think they should have been the main focuses of the trilogy, but obviously Disney had plans to do else.
Yeah, I think Adam Driver is probably the most talented cast member that's not a legacy character, like in terms of the new characters being introduced here. I think, in this movie, I don't think Kylo's the most interesting, but I think Adam Driver is certainly the best actor. 100%. I think the most interesting new character here is probably Finn, for sure. I think, just the Stormtrooper backstory is very interesting, but they stuff it up in about 5 minutes. Because he goes from being traumatized about Stormtroopers killing others, and then 5 minutes later he's murdering Stormtroopers, and then he proceeds to murder Stormtroopers for the entire
This is what we're talking about.
rest of the movie.
When you start to look into it, it unravels.
Yeah, and that's he never once stops to actually say, I'm murdering, people just like me, because he says at one stage, we're supposed to empathize with him because he was taken away from his parents at birth or whatever, and then trained as a stormtrooper. So that automatically makes us think, okay, these stormtroopers, they're real people and they've been taken away from their families, and that's bad, But then here is Finn, like literally in the next scene, or in the next shot,
murdering,
just celebrating the fact that he's blown them up, and he doesn't just like blow them up from a long way away. He gets the lightsaber and he stabs them, and he holds them as he stabs them. And this is the guy that, the main character, how we're introduced to this character is that he sees a stormtrooper die and he's affected by that. But then he's not affected by it, as he does much worse for the rest of the movie. Yeah. So that is one specific example of how there's still potential for the character, but off to the wrong start.
Are we entering spoiler territory here?
Well, I've only just discussed like the first 10 minutes, I guess, but
yeah. We should probably enter spoiler territory.
Well, there are some other things we could talk about first, but unless you're itching to go on a rant or something.
No.
All right, let's have a discussion about Rey. Look, we have to do it, lads. We have to do it because she is the main character of this story. Supposedly. It doesn't seem like that at the start, but definitely towards the end. Give me one... Give me one thing you'd like about Rey and one thing you don't like about Rey.
Do you want me to go?
Who's ready to go?
Okay. I like Rey's theme.
A musical theme?
Yeah, if I can get away with that.
Yeah, sure.
And one thing I don't like is probably Rey. No, look. I think her character design's pretty cool. I like how she's sort of grown up on this desolate planet. She's kind of had to sort of survive for herself, sort of scavenging. How she's sort of building her own sort of future. I think it's pretty interesting. As for things I don't like, I don't like how her story sort of becomes like she's just almighty powerful, just out of nowhere. Like they just gave her all of this power that it just had no build up towards. With Anakin, they could get away with that because they had the whole "you're the chosen one" sort of thing going on, and with Luke, they had that because they actually built that up in the movies, and they had Alec Guinness there to sort of coach him. But in this, she just kind of becomes a Force user out of nowhere. She picks up a lightsaber and she uses the Force. So I think it comes down to poor writing for that. But I think her character design and her beginnings was pretty cool.
Nick, what's one thing you like about Rey?
I've taken all the good ones.
Yeah, that's a bit tricky.
I feel like we're at couples counselling. Can you name one positive thing about your partner?
Let's do
It's
role
just
play
like,
now.
oh, she makes me dinner.
Well,
all right, what do you think about Rey? What do you like about her?
I think her character in like the first half of the movie is pretty good. Like she's kind of like she's just sort of a person who's been just waiting her whole life for her parents to come back. Like she's so content with just this one goal, just to stay where she is. She doesn't want to leave. Like she'll help people, but she won't. She's focused. Always has that in the back of her mind that she has to stay there because any moment now, her parents could come back. And then it feels like she just sort of abandons that halfway through.
that's a good point.
Like, especially at the end, she's just like, oh, I guess I'm gonna go find Luke Skywalker.
There was a
And there's no real mention of her breaking, like, at a point where she clicks and she's just like, no, I'm not going to go back.
And
to stay and help.
On that exact point, in A New Hope, obviously a similar thing happens because this movie's a copy of A New Hope, but in A New Hope, the thing that spurs Luke Skywalker into the Resistance is the fact that his, like, literal, like, uncle and auntie are, like, burnt to a crisp, and he's like...
Boba Fett probably did that.
They were stormtroopers, I think.
But who uses a flamethrower? Who uses fire?
Yeah, maybe it was.
Yeah.
I'm sure you could find a YouTube theory.
Flame troopers.
Yeah. But he looks at that scene and he goes, okay, there's nothing for me here now. I have to do this.
Yeah.
So I get what you're saying about Rey. She's sort of just like... She's told by Maz Kanata at one stage, like, this is your path. But, like, she doesn't know Maz Kanata. You know, she's not a trusted source or an ally of Rey's, so why would she just like take her word for it? You know.
Yeah.
She initially just runs away, but then she just essentially just gets captured by Kylo Ren, and then she conveniently gets her Force powers so she can escape. And ultimately, it just seems like between those 2 points, she just decides she's not going to try to go home.
Yeah, there was a point there in the middle where they first landed on a certain planet. Trying to avoid spoilers here. And a certain someone gives her a blaster to use in defense, and then offers her a job. And she says, "I've been away for too long now." But that's really the only one mention where she's like, "Okay, maybe I should go back to Jakku. And then from there on out, she just completely abandons that and decides to hang out with her resistant friends.
Yeah, for sure. What do I like about Rey?
You're gonna struggle with this.
I like the fact that she's kind of like got that underdog sort of, persona. It's very, it's very Luke Skywalker, but you do see her as like this lonely figure. She's been hard done by, so you want to see her succeed, right? Things haven't gone her way. And the thing I don't like about Rey is from about 10 minutes in, everything goes her way from that point onwards. She encounters a problem and immediately knows the solution. And then she does it again and again and again. I mean, she does it about 5 times before they even land the Millennium Falcon. Even just in that chase scene alone, bright ideas just come to her consistently throughout the entire film, and it makes it very hard to sort of
believe.
Yeah, well, and to relate to her. She's sort of set up as this lonely character that's been hard done by, but then she seems to not only know everything but also get everything that she needs. Sort of like, like a spoiled brat would. How you sort of just, you don't encounter any problems because you're automatically just given the solutions at every turn. There's no sort of scene where you're like, oh, that is a great Rey moment. I really am behind Rey in this scene. It's probably only at the very start when she's, polishing the scraps and then getting like her food.
Yeah, and in a way, the best stuff of Rey in this movie is, like you said, the first 10 minutes, where she's on her own, she's surviving on her own, and then she meets up with Finn and the other gang, and she just turns into a completely different character. And it might have been really good for her character sort of to stay separate from Finn and all of these other legacy characters until the second movie, where she had just kind of been building up, who she is as a character on Jakku and exploring those things, because in my opinion, that's the most interesting stuff here in this movie, is her scavenging beginnings. And I wanted to see more of that, but they only show that in the first 10, 20 minutes.
Yeah, and they're able to get so much across in those 10 minutes.
Yep.
With virtually no dialogue.
Exactly, yeah.
It's all visual.
Yeah.
She doesn't say a word until she meets BB-8.
Yep.
And hardly any other character does.
And to be fair, Daisy Ridley's acting in the first 5 minutes, 10 minutes is actually quite good, because you do connect to the character and she doesn't say anything. You do have to put that down to the performance, because you can have cool visuals and visuals that sort of give you some information, but there is a sort of a strength to her performance in that first 10 or so minutes, where you do sort of automatically sympathize with her, but then the only problem is it just sort of gets worse from there, and you can sort of point to a specific period in time for all of the new characters and say, okay, this is where they were at their most interesting, and then they slowly decline from there. And for Rey,
or drastically decline.
Yeah, and for Rey, it's
thanks for the information.
Clarification. For Rey, it's probably around the 20-minute mark.
Yeah.
Whereas other characters do a lot better. Finn maybe gets to about, if you're being nice, maybe 2/3 of the way through. Poe is probably a third of the way through, and then
he has his moment at that fight scene.
Yeah, okay, maybe there.
I'd say Poe is a pretty consistent side character throughout this movie. In number 8 and number 9, he just completely gets shoved to the side.
Sure.
In this movie, he's pretty good.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on Poe Dameron?
I love the actor. He's Oscar Isaac is a brilliant actor. Like him in the first few scenes that he's in is like with him and Kylo. The way he tries to be snarky with Kylo, and then Kylo just sort of puts him in his place immediately.
Yep.
But ultimately, they tried to make him feel like he's a part of like the big three, being like Finn, Rey,
Yeah.
Poe. But
It's
then
not really though, is he?
kind of like how Luke, Han, and Leia.
They were trying to do their own thing.
Yeah, they're trying to do that kind of like that kind of big trio, but it kind of he becomes just a side character.
Yep.
Well, he was originally supposed to die, wasn't he? And then Oscar Isaac talked J.J. Abrams into keeping him alive after the crash. Because apparently Oscar Isaac had died in a few of his previous movies, like in a row or something. And he's like, oh, really? I die again? Like, can I please live?
He wanted the money.
Yeah, I can see how that.
Because he sort of has nowhere to go after he comes back, you know?
Yeah.
And he doesn't even meet Rey until the end of the second movie. Really?
Yeah.
So.
Well,
he doesn't meet one of the main characters until.
Interestingly enough, Rey, Finn, and Poe, I don't think they're in a trio together until
The Rise of
Skywalker.
Yeah, they're not all together in the same scene.
And like that's in like some of the final scenes in the Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah,
And
a couple scenes at the start.
Yeah.
And the sad thing about that was I actually thought that they were really good as a trio in Rise of Skywalker.
There's some of the actual good scenes. That and some of Kylo's scenes.
Yeah. But in order to have all three of them together in this movie, you have to get rid of some characters, and that means Han Solo's got to go.
Well,
But yeah, exactly. But why would you do that?
Yeah.
Why would you not have Han Solo be a main component of the film?
Yeah.
You know, you got to have that draw.
It's stuff like removing General Hux for starters, and getting rid of Admiral Pink Hair in the second movie. Like, we don't need her.
Don't forget Rose.
And Rose. Just a bunch of side characters. We're not even talking about The Force Awakens anymore.
Zori Bliss in Rise of Skywalker.
I mean, what the hell was that?
And Lando's like maybe daughter.
That's just an absolute joke.
And that random general killed Hux for some reason.
And he's
why couldn't they just keep Hux and just not make him a spy?
Yeah, which is the crazy thing, because I don't know if you guys know about this, but they were like heavily advertising. I don't know his name. It's not coming to me right now. But that general in the Rise of Skywalker, they were saying
he was in Loki, wasn't he? Recently,
Yeah.
He was old, like
the old man.
They were saying he had a huge role in the Rise of Skywalker, and it was like the most insignificant role I've ever seen.
He shoots Husk, and then he's just like, "Oh, I've served Palpatine since the Empire, and it's supposed to be something big and meaningful."
I can't even remember that.
See, I didn't remember that.
Yeah.
Some reason I remember that. Probably because it mentions the original trilogy. I'm like, oh, Empire.
Yeah.
That's what they
But
wanted
no one
to do.
cares. No one remembers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something that I think we all really enjoyed throughout this movie was the visuals, and we touched on it a bit already, but I do agree with you, Nick, that this is, from the sequel trilogy, the best looking one, which is kind of odd considering this is the first one. You'd think as it got progressively better. You know, look at the prequel trilogy.
As time went on.
The Phantom Menace looks like trash, but Revenge of the Sith actually looks quite good.
better than most modern movies. Cough, cough, Morbius.
Oh my god! Don't even bring up Morbius.
But you've got a great point. I mean, and The Force Awakens, I think it looks better than The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker.
Oh,
and I think the only reason why that is because they made this movie over maybe 3 years, and whereas the other ones were over 2 years, they had a sharp deadline. They had to reach it.
Yeah, I think that's what really hurt the sequel trilogy more. Like, you can just tell the general degrade. They just didn't have time.
Yeah. And the reshoots as well, like
Yeah.
they're constantly changing things. They're waiting too long to like finalize the script. And
Constantly changing directors. They've got different directors for each movie in a trilogy, which isn't exactly a good formula.
It worked. Like I said this while we were watching it. It worked for the original trilogy, but in theory, don't change your directors.
well, in the
Or
original
don't
trilogy,
change your writers.
the writers is the main one.
Yeah. I'm gonna say something here. You know, I hate The Last Jedi. Like, I absolutely despise that movie. I hate it the most out of the whole sequel trilogy. But I think it has the best cinematography out of the three.
Okay.
I don't know when the last
It
time
does.
you two watched it was.
It does have some beautiful scenes.
It's got some really good cinematography in it.
I do hear that from the Twitter people.
Yeah, but no, it legitimately does. I think it's probably better than The Force Awakens in terms of cinematography.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll have to revisit that when we do.
I think we'll have a good chat about that.
Yeah. It will be an interesting conversation. But I was surprised how good this looked. I thought it was going to be pretty standard, sort of like that MCU cinematography, like just
dated and felt very shaky and all over the place.
Especially the fight scenes, like whenever there was an X-wing or an action scene, it was really good, and it wasn't the sort of chop, what's actually going on here. It's a bit disorientating. There was long takes. There was good cuts. There was stable cameras.
There was good camera tracking as well.
Yeah, everything's
very good.
Everything sort of flowed together. It didn't all of a sudden cut all over the place. It felt like sometimes you couldn't even tell it cut. Like you said when we were watching it, like when the X-wing showed up on
Takodana.
Takodana,
and how it just follows the fight as they fly around.
Yep.
It just continues to move, even if it doesn't cut to the exact same location. It feels like
exactly.
one
It feels like
scene.
the same
It's
shot.
not just like a bunch of random shots of explosions, people getting blown up, and ships flying around the place. It's a well choreographed, consistent scene. Rather than just what the MCU does most of the time.
And I think how you can know that is by, if somebody asked you, okay, draw a map of Takodana in terms of, where was Kylo Ren and Rey? Where's that Maz Kanata castle? Where does Kylo first show up? Because of the camera movements in the action scenes, you get a sense of what the place is actually, what's situated where. It's not confusing. You can always track where things are. It's not like where are we now? Oh, we're just in a random forest. Chop, chop, chop. I don't know what way we're facing. Up is down. You got a good sense of where things were. You always could feel like you knew like the sense of scale and stuff.
Yeah, it's not like just an empty canvas. Like one of my main criticisms of Endgame is the final battle. It's just a grey battlefield. You have no idea where anything is. Where's the Avengers buildings? Where are they? Where's the rubble of them? Where's the van? Like where's the ship? Like, you have no orientation of where everything is.
That's the problem when you have like 500 characters and you don't have.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
You're trying to like where are the lines? Where are they fighting?
Yep.
And it's just like because when you get to that point, you can just be like, oh, this person's here, but no, they're here now. You don't have to have it consistent. It's so hard to track it.
Yep.
But they give you in the action scenes for The Force Awakens, they give you such a good sense of just the environment, and it's always consistent.
Yeah, and where
so
everything is.
There's so much visual. There's a lot there's a lot you can see and track. There's like usually a big building somewhere or some rubble, and it stays consistent. You keep seeing it, so you know where you are.
Yep. You can place yourself down, and you can sort of pinpoint and sort of figure out where you are in terms of everything that's around you, which is a good thing. I'm gonna give you a bit of a sort of a fun fact here, Sam. So the cinematographer also did The Rise of Skywalker. But he also did The Amazing Spider-Man 2.
I know that, but I didn't know that. But that's an unlocked piece of information. But are you surprised?
I mean, it looks pretty good, and TASM 2 has really good cinematography as well. So
what other? I think that means
he's done some sort of Star Trek stuff, which is with
some
J.J.
J.J. Abrams stuff.
Yeah, he's definitely part of JJ's.
Some Mission Impossible stuff.
Yeah, that would be J.J. Abrams as well.
Yeah, MI3 is J.J. Yeah.
Yeah, but it does have good cinematography. I mean, say what you want about The Rise of Skywalker, I can't even, I don't even want to, but
it has a lot of good.
Looks alright.
Yeah.
It has a fair few good shots.
Yeah.
Not as. It feels like they were definitely rushed for that one.
Yeah. I'm just thinking of the final battle in The Rise of Skywalker, which is just blue.
Yeah,
It's just blue and copy and paste ships everywhere.
Yeah.
But
That's
that's
random references.
Yeah.
probably just more of a story thing. But in terms of the action scenes, you look at the action scenes in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, quite good.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're not disorientating. You can sort of, I could probably draw a map of, you know, what was where, and, you know, you're not being disorientated throughout the action scene. So I think that's obviously carries over here. I mean, the Rise of Skywalker, I mean, that's just disorientating, like in every aspect, from, you know, the story to the cinematography
The
to
whole
everything.
movie. Man.
Exactly. So
There's
yeah.
no... Because going back to the battle at Takodana, is that
Yeah.
how you say it? One very easy way that one clever way they use to help keep orientation is by having it next to a bit of water.
Yep.
So if you can see the water, you know exactly if you're facing this way, the water's on your left side, or you're looking that way.
Yep.
Yeah,
If
and
you
there's a
see
forest on the other
If
side
you
as
can
well.
only see water, it's a very simple but clever way to help orientate it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at Exegol in The
Yeah.
Rise of Skywalker, everything looks the same.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you've got a bunch of ships, a bunch of Star Destroyers on one side, and a bunch of random ships on the other side, but when they mesh together, you have no idea what's going
Yeah.
on.
And
So
when you've
where
got
everything is.
500 starships in the sky, there's no
There's
sense
no
of
real
placement.
visual indicators on which direction is where.
Yep.
Exactly right.
And most of those shots in the air, you can't see where the stuff on the ground is happening. Like,
Yep.
There's no, they pretty much never show it except for maybe one scene.
Yep.
But even then, you look at it sometimes, it's just like, how is that? Like, it doesn't really match up. It feels out of place.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah, all of the visuals are very good in my opinion. The only reason why I don't think like the final battle works is because of like the story. It's not like it's no fault of like the cinematographer. Like I think the visuals are quite good. In terms of sound, the score for this movie doesn't really do much for me. I do like the Kylo and the Rey theme, obviously, but apart from that, you know, if you were to line up all of the movies in the originals and the prequels, and then where does The Force Awakens sit, I'd put it right at the bottom in terms of score. Like, I think every other movie has a better score, but I know, Jaden, you're a big fan of the score.
No, I'm a big fan of the score, but in saying that, I do think every other movie is probably better. Maybe Attack of the Clones.
The Attack of the Clones had a lot.
But I know it's got like Across the Stars, which is really good. But I can't name anything else in Attack of the Clones.
If anything, I'd say Rise of Skywalker has a very weak score.
Yes, I don't even
there's
remember that.
nothing in there's nothing that really strikes.
I like the trailer music for the Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but that's
That's
count.
about it.
That was probably made less than
Yeah, I'm sure it's good music. It's just forgettable because the movie is forgettable.
Yeah, and from what I remember, a lot of the music it's reused. It doesn't feel there's nothing. It doesn't feel like there's anything new.
Yep.
Like they're all returning themes.
Yeah, except, you know, the Kylo and the Rey theme.
Yeah, that one wasn't. Yeah, it was like a mesh of their themes, which wasn't bad, but the scene itself was.
Oh, are you talking about the Rise of Skywalker?
Yeah, I think so. Am I? Yeah.
Yeah.
Talking about how that one's. I'd say that one's more forgettable than Force Awakens.
But I
yeah.
love Rey's theme, man. I'm obsessed with Rey's theme. Like, it's easily top 10 Star Wars for me. Like, yeah, something about that theme is just.
Yeah,
It's so different for Star Wars. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
The Mandalorian with Ludwig, he kind of reinvented Star Wars. But John Williams had already done that back in 2015 when he reinvented his own invention.
Right.
I really, really love that theme. Yeah.
Any thoughts on the score for The Force Awakens specifically?
Overall, it's very nostalgic, heavy.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Which
on that.
makes sense. It's they're using a lot of the legacy characters, and they've got a lot of those reveals where they expect the audience to clap, which they do. It is pretty good. Ultimately, the Resistance theme is pretty good. Like that's another new one.
Is it?
Yeah, that's the Resistance theme.
But is it new? Does
Yeah,
that
I don't
not
think
show
the
it before?
Rebellion.
I think it's new.
I think the Rebellion didn't have much of a theme. They usually
Maybe
had,
it's
like
the
the
Force
themes. they
Yeah.
usually
Okay.
had.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right. For sure.
And like Kylo Ren's and the First Order's theme was pretty good.
Yeah.
But like in Rey's theme, I agree, is very good. Like, it's kind of surprising how John Williams can create such a good theme for a a character who ultimately doesn't achieve much.
Yep.
In the movie.
Yep. And it's only on screen, or should I say in the movie, for like a split second of time. Like
Yeah,
you've got
which is-
Luke's Force theme when he watches the binary sunset in A New Hope, and that goes on for
It really swells
Yeah.
up as well.
10 seconds.
Yeah, and it feels like an orchestra is building up.
It's very triumphant.
Yep.
And then in Ray's, it's just off in the background, just
It's just
tiny little
Yep.
tinkles and
Yeah. I mean, there's no sort of best way to do it, but I do like, a very loud score, and this didn't really like grab my attention, I guess.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, so we're taking a bit of time here. So in order to sort of speed things along, maybe get to the meat of the matter first.
Yep.
I'll pose a question just about what your favorite scene of the film is.
Oh god.
And why it is so. For me, it's the Takodana battle. Obviously, we're entering spoiler territory now, so just go
I
nuts.
think we've already gone into it. but
Yeah,
I'll-
for sure. Takodana battle for me is just a great action scene. It's at a point in the movie where things haven't gone. It's not a great movie at this stage. It never really was, but at this stage in the film, things haven't gone terribly. There is a movie that could be made from this point.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the battle is very good. It's very well shot, as we've talked about. But Kylo Ren is very menacing, which I feel like, is rare because he's not very menacing for the rest of the film. But there is a presence to him as he arrives. There's a presence to the Resistance as they arrive. Poe has that great moment of heroism when he, blows up 25 fighters, in quite spectacular fashion, and he sort of shares this moment with Finn, without knowing it, sort of thing. They both sort of cheer together,
Yep.
without knowing it. I think that's a great moment for me, but it's not particularly a great Star Wars moment. It's no, it's no Luke versus Vader duel or Anakin and Obi-Wan. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a great scene, but it's not a great Star Wars scene. And I don't think there's a single scene in this movie, apart from maybe a few exchanges between Han Solo and anyone else, that are really great Star Wars scenes. I think there's a lot of world-building mistakes here, but that scene works for me because it's a very well-made action scene.
Yep. Do you want me to go? Or?
Yeah, you go.
Okay. I'm gonna bring it back to the beginning. I really like Rey's humble beginnings on Jakku, and just how she's silently sort of going down the inside of a Star Destroyer. I don't know, something about that is just, it's just really interesting to me. And they just had this short time to explore it, and then they just kind of forgot about it. I like the theme there. I like the cinematography. I like the dialogue because there's no dialogue. It's just, when I think of Force Awakens, I think of Rey on Jakku, Scavenger, orange sunsets. That's what I think of when I think Force Awakens. So that's probably my favourite sort of elements of the movie. But I also really like the Takodana battle.
Yeah. If anything, I'd have to say similar to yours with the opening, but more of the First Orders.
Yep.
The very beginning, where the First Order attacks the village. To me, it feels, if you look at it, it's very similar. It's quite similar to the start of A New Hope with the Empire chasing that shuttle down.
Mm-hmm.
But it sort of amps up a bit more of the horror sort of essence of the First Order, makes them feel like they're just, because they're not fighting rebels, they're fighting just random villagers.
Mm-hmm.
They're just slaughtering them, burning their homes down, just storming the
Yeah.
village. And then you just have Kylo Ren just coming in after, walking through a battlefield.
That's a
And
good
just-
point.
Walks up with this old man, and then essentially in the end just slices him
Yeah.
in half, and then stops the bolt
Yeah.
in front of him. It's such a great opening for the First Order and for Kylo Ren.
It makes them
Just-
menacing.
It makes them like a genuine threat. Like, they don't care who they're fighting; they will just tear through anything to get what they want.
And when you look back at like I love the OG trilogy, but when you look back at A New Hope, um, that first sort of entrance on the Tantive at the start, you know, where they're chasing down the shuttle, and then they enter it and Darth Vader walks down a hallway. It all looks really like cheesy.
Yeah, real 90 like
It's like
19
heavy, like 1970s. like yeah, it's really cheesy when you look back at it. But no, they did a really good job of sort of establishing Kylo Ren in the First Order as a genuine threat in this movie. Mm.
Yeah, so what do we think of the First Order in terms of, you know, let's not forget that the last movie in this saga is Return of the Jedi, and the final frames of Return of the Jedi tell us that the Empire is defeated and that the rebellion has won, and now that's going to, well, take into account the prequels and the message there. Now this is going to lead to the re-establishment of democracy and, you know, a better world, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
How do we go from that to the start of this movie with the First Order presumably being on top again? Do you feel like that was explained at all?
Well, I'm just trying to think if there's any sort of Star Wars media that I've watched that takes place in that time period.
The Mandalorian.
Yeah, but it doesn't really.
It doesn't
talk
explain it.
Not yet.
much about the First Order.
When you compare it to like real world scenarios, like 30 years is a long time. And when you look back at like, say, the 1980s, which is, I know, 40 odd years ago, 1980s was like a completely different time period. Like a lot of countries didn't have women's rights and stuff back then. So in our actual real world, there's been significant ground made on these huge, you know, sort of political and social economic issues. So I think 30 years is some pretty significant time to have an event such as the First Order rise again to actually, you know, be believing. So I do believe that in 30 years it can flip like that, especially for a universe like Star Wars.
Especially if they're sort of described as, well, it's kind of like a byproduct of
I have heard
Empire forces. I think I heard that or read somewhere that they came from the unknown regions, which is like a weird regions of Star Wars Space 9 really goes into because you don't need to. Don't really need to do it, and it's a bit dangerous. But one thing that is kind of weird is like they don't really establish in terms of the strength of their fleet is like how they stand against the New Republic. Mm-hmm. Like there are hints that they can't take them on directly because they have to take out their fleet from a distance. Mm-hmm. That was the main purpose of Starkiller, to wipe out a system of take out a government entirely.
See, it's stuff like this that it goes over my head.
Yeah, but we're not shown the New Republic at all in this movie.
There's the closest you see is 5 planets getting blown up and like a few of the Mon Calamari cruisers in orbit, but you don't really see. Like maybe if we had a scene with the First Order, say if above Jakku there was a cruiser there, or like, you know, say Kylo Ren's ship, like Star Destroyer was there, and then like a Mon Calamari cruiser comes and then they go away because they can't fight it or something. Show that they can't fight, but the only thing stopping them is the New Republic. So if they take that out, there's nothing stopping them. If that could have been genuinely built up, like you kind of see that in The Rise of Skywalker, how like they're starting to take over. There's no one to stop them. Mm-hmm. It's like there's no because the Resistance for some reason exists, even though the New Republic. Like why can't the New Republic step in?
Yeah.
Like they obviously, like they're funding the Resistance. They obviously know what's happening. Why can't they step in? Like it felt like they were kind of worried to talk about politics.
Well, I mean,
yes, and you know what? J.J. Abrams famously has said that he wanted to do the sequel trilogy to correct the mistakes of the prequel trilogy, and first of all,
royally screwed up there.
That's not the attitude to have. You know, the prequel trilogy that's George Lucas's vision. You know, like it or not.
You don't talk trash about that.
Well, and so he's clearly gone, oh, we're not going to engage with the politics, but you know,
ultimately it's important to start.
Yeah, because the prequels, it's controlled by the Republic. It's a democracy. And you know what? The entire prequels shows that democracy being eroded into an empire dictatorship, and that perfectly leads into the original trilogy. But then, from the original trilogy, the empire gets blown up. So then, theoretically, the democracy should start again. But it presumably did. But then somewhere it went wrong. And this is a problem that I have with the film in terms of Luke Skywalker's story, in terms of his Jedi Academy. It was going well, but somewhere along the way it went wrong. Why aren't we seeing that? Why isn't that the first movie? Why isn't the first movie in this trilogy Luke Skywalker raising that academy and then Kylo Ren revolting and going wrong, or going bad, or to the dark side, and then having the second movie being the confrontation between Kylo Ren and Luke Skywalker and maybe Rey coming in?
Yeah. It really felt like they were just like, okay, let's just put a ton of questions on the table, and then that is just going to lead to tons of spin-offs. That felt like that was the ultimate goal of this movie, just to fuel spin-offs.
To make money.
Yeah, that's all they saw it. That's all it was seen as initially, just as a launching, like a platform to launch a new MCU.
Yep.
Or just
I mean,
tons of
Star Wars is the biggest IP out there.
Yeah. But they must have known that they were going to do, like, this was episode 7. There's going to be 3. There's going to be 3. So there's going to be 2 more after this. So then presumably they have 2 more movies to wrap it up. It could have, if it was received positively, we could have had, a Rey Disney Plus TV show, or a Poe or a Finn show. And we probably should have those things theoretically.
Well, we shouldn't have them. We should have had them in the movies.
Well, theoretically, yes, but can you imagine if people loved those trilogies? We'd have, Rey and Poe and Finn content coming from all, every single Disney Plus tab. There would be new sequel content because they would push it so hard, because they'd have the characters locked in, they'd have the actors locked in, they could do whatever they want, and it's their own thing, so they don't have to pay Harrison Ford, hundreds of millions of dollars just to say a line to Ben Solo in the 3rd movie to sort of wrap up his story. They would have loved that, but it didn't work out for them. So instead, we're going to get we've gotten a Boba Fett show,
which we shouldn't have gotten.
Yeah. At least not directed by the same dude who made Spy Kids.
Is that true?
Yes,
especially
that's Robert
the last
Rodriguez.
episode, especially, and the one with the weird saga episode
where he does the spin move.
But my point being that they're setting up these characters, but they went nowhere, and therefore we don't care. We don't care about Rey. I would love to care about Rey. In fact, I think she's not insufferable in this movie, but I just don't like her in this movie.
Yep.
She doesn't feel like she's pushing the plot forward. It's more like she's just getting dragged along while she's trying to drag herself back.
It's like BB-8's doing the heavy lifting when it comes to the plot.
Anakin's pretty insufferable in number 1 and 2, but at least they had some sort of motive going on there.
You had other characters to help support that, like in Phantom Menace, you had Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan. There was more the focus on them.
It was the mentors that... Yeah.
And then, more or less the second one, there was more focus on the relationship between Anakin and Padme, and Anakin's begin to his descent to the dark side.
Yep.
And then Obi-Wan then discovering him, being his master, and then discovering all sorts of other things, such as the clones and everything else.
There's a trajectory. There's a development of events. And one thing that I think is particularly, something that you can point to in a great movie and say, oh, that's why it's great, is if the plot naturally moves along. Think of movies like The Dark Knight. That's not a movie. Things just happen, and you're just watching, and you're glued to it because it's so, this happens, and this happens, and this happens. And it's so natural in terms of, the Joker does this, then he does this, and there's a continuous, and it's perfectly paced, continuous plan.
There's a continuous force pushing the plot forward.
Yeah. Whereas in this, I feel like if certain coincidences didn't happen, the plot would just die. It would fall apart. For instance, if there was no Millennium Falcon on Jakku, plot would die because Han Solo would not come into the movie.
Yep.
And, if the gangs didn't show up to try to catch Han Solo, then we wouldn't have got an action scene. And that wouldn't have led to the next thing, which wouldn't have led to the next thing. Everything is just
it's all very coincidental is essentially what it is.
Yeah. And it feels like no one there's not really anyone who none of the characters who want to go on this journey.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's trying to get out of it. Like Finn just wants to run away. Rey just wants to go back. Solo just doesn't want to go back.
Doesn't want to make any more movies.
Yeah, indeed.
That's what he
wants to
do.
die.
He doesn't want to be a dad. And then the only like you said, the only person pushing the plot really is BB-8 because he's trying to get back to the Resistance because
That's so funny.
he's the only one pushing the plot forward.
Not even R2D2 wants to be there. He's like,
he's
nah,
just asleep.
I'm
He just doesn't care.
I'll miss this one, guys.
I'm out.
It's just, yeah, like you said, just coincidences. It's just how this movie progresses. There's no goal in any of the characters besides just to get out of it.
Yeah.
All the characters just don't want to be in it.
You briefly mentioned this before, Sam. You said it just goes to show that J.J. Abrams doesn't understand Star Wars, and that's to a point that's true. Like we needed that sort of backstory behind it. If he said, which you brought up before, the fact that he was trying to do the prequels better, it just goes to show that he has no idea what he's doing.
He didn't like the political aspects.
That's some of the best stuff in Star Wars is the political aspects. The problem with the prequels is that it just executed it wrong.
Yeah.
If you don't have politics in Star Wars, you don't have Star Wars. Star Wars is all about politics. I mean, it's in the name. Wars.
Yeah.
What is wars about?
Wars are inherently political. I mean,
Yes.
why do they happen? They happen because of political differences.
Yeah. So instead of saying, I'm going to do the prequels better, I'm going to do it correctly, say, hey, I'm going to take the political elements and try to improve on that. That's what he should have said.
Mm-hmm.
But instead, he's got an ego kick out of it and he's trying to make a franchise that's better than George Lucas's original vision.
Rather than building off of what he's created and make something new from
Yep.
it. And he's just trying to do the same thing but trying to make it better in his vision.
Yeah. And meanwhile, giving us absolutely nothing new. What is particularly special about The Force Awakens that A New Hope doesn't have in terms of, characters or emotions or, story? The only thing I can sort of grasp at is Kylo Ren, but that's just a character that has to happen. There has to be a bad guy. There has to be a Darth Vader replacement. But I'm struggling to see what J.J. Abrams, with his passion for storytelling, brought to the Star Wars universe here, apart from the characters that he created.
I think it's the characters is essentially what he was going for. I mean, Snoke, Palpatine, Kylo Ren, Vader, Rey, Luke Skywalker. It's just Han Solo is essentially Obi-Wan Kenobi in this movie. So he's just kind of reinventing the cast. He's taking elements from the original characters and making his own characters. In terms of storytelling, there's nothing original here. Nothing. Unfortunately.
And the only real thing that you could say was Finn's backstory being, it was the first time we've ever seen a stormtrooper
Yeah.
that we have been sympathised with. They've always just been the generic bad guys for the good guys to beat up. But the opening of this movie is all about Finn, ultimately.
Yeah.
And showing his, who he is, where he's from, kind of giving us an idea of why he's trying to leave the First Order. And then they sort of just abandon that. It feels like all of a sudden they decided, you know what, we're going to make him a comic relief type character, and then we're going to focus more on Rey. So it's something more for Rey to then bounce off of to try to develop her story, but then ultimately it leads her story doesn't even get developed anyway.
Yep. That's the problem I have with it. Is I don't really have a personal preference. I think both characters had major potential to become something. But the way they started off is they essentially advertised Finn as being the main character, and then they just pushed him aside and they said, "No, we're going to focus on Rey."
Well, just remember all those posters with Finn with the blue lightsaber before the movie came out.
Yeah.
It was everywhere.
Yeah.
Except in China.
Yeah,
Except in China.
Have you seen that? In China, he's just not on the poster.
Yeah, we laugh about it, but it's really bad.
Oh yes, terrible.
Yeah.
Those tickets.
If you're going to do that, start off with Rey as your main character. Don't change your mind halfway through and start developing Rey and forget about Finn. You could quite easily build up both characters at the same time as well. They just, for some reason, they just decided to put all their effort into Rey and they just completely stuffed it up. So, yeah, maybe they should have gone with Finn. I think Finn's a much more interesting choice. I think Stormtrooper turned Jedi is just such a cool idea. It's so unique. It's the most unique idea this movie has.
We've never seen anything like it.
Yeah.
In terms of, especially in the main movies.
Yeah.
It's like we've seen like a poor kid on a random desert planet become a Jedi. We've seen that twice. Well, I agree, both in very different ways, but ultimately the same concept. Like giving us something that I think that's what people also sold a lot of people with this movie, is just seeing that concept, and that's why it sort of made so much money, because people are like, oh, this is something, could be something new, something fresh. But like you can see from the box office numbers how no other Star Wars movie has come close to that 2 billion.
Which is not how it should have gone. I mean, it should have gone upwards.
On memory, when Rogue One made only $1 billion, which is still a lot, but like
Still a lot of money.
half.
To be
of
fair,
the-
that's not a like a saga movie. You know,
yeah,
it's not a.
but ultimately, it's still like you think it still would make something a bit closer.
Yeah.
Just straight 50%
Yeah,
drop.
for sure.
And then I think Last Jedi was like 1.5 billion.
Yeah, that's incredible, because the fact that your sequel makes less, that never happens.
500,
The sequel
like-
always makes more.
Don't even think about percentages. $500 million left.
It's a lot of money.
Less. That's a lot of
25%.
money, regardless.
Yeah.
That would be like if the first Avengers they made 1.2 billion or something. That'd be like if Age of Ultron made 700 million.
Yeah.
Like, no matter how big the numbers are, that's still a lot of money lost for some reason.
Yeah.
And what was Rise of Skywalker, like 600 million?
Really.
Which is
It was
insane.
really bad. And I think
I feel like it still maybe got to $1 billion, maybe.
I think I remember seeing this.
But I think it was less.
It was pretty low.
It was still less than The Last Jedi, but I think it still may have just cracked $1 billion.
The point is that
But the fact that it's going down is the main
is
thing.
terrible.
Yeah.
Oh, it didn't make $1 billion.
But only just.
Yeah,
Only just.
Yeah, I think it made, because Rogue One was like closer to 1.1.
Which for Star Wars
Last
is
Jedi was 1.3.
for Star Wars, that's ridiculous.
And it shouldn't be going down.
This should be making near $3 billion like the Marvel movies. Star Wars is the biggest IP out there, and it's barely scratching $1 billion.
Yeah, and I was wrong. Last Jedi is 1.3, so that's a $700 million
I said it's even
increase.
worse.
So it's even
An
worse.
extra $200 million, that's a lot of money. It's a lot
I
of
think
money.
that's more money than Deadpool 2 made.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, Deadpool 2 did worse than first Deadpool for some reason, which was weird.
Yeah.
Well, that movie wasn't very good, so...
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess the novelty wasn't as... I guess it sold the first... Anyway, back on topic.
Yeah. Okay, to kind of get us towards the wrapping up, I want to go round the room. I'll start and give the... So we've gone through our best scene. I want to hear everyone's main issue or main particular scene that presents an issue or whatever. You know, what's the most egregious one for you guys? For me, you know, I made this clear when we were watching it. It's this one line that Maz Kanata says when she's asked a question regarding Luke Skywalker's lightsaber or Anakin Skywalker's lightsaber. She says, Han's like, where did you get that lightsaber? And Maz Kanata says, a good story for another time. She just completely dismisses the plot hole. You know, it's a plot hole.
Yeah.
The fact that she coincidentally has the lightsaber, and she's also a friend of Han Solo who Rey bumped into. You know, there's so many coincidences leading to this point. So it would have been good to just get a snippet, you know, of, oh, I knew somebody who was in Bespin and, you know, they were working in the junkyard or something, you know, just a little bit piece of something. But they didn't even do that. They didn't even do the common, decent thing and give us you know, half a line of terrible exposition dialogue, just make something up. But they just couldn't even do that. They just couldn't even be bothered. And that one line summarizes everything that I think that is wrong with this movie. The fact that they just accept that what they have is good enough and they're not going to provide any reasoning whatsoever. It is the worst thing about this movie. There's no substance, there's no thought, there's no vision.
Well,
A good story for another time. This is a trailer of a movie.
Yeah.
This movie is a trailer for a movie that we never got because J.J. Abrams wasn't interested in actually doing the hard work and trying to figure out where these characters are going to go. He just wanted to do the easy part and say, you know what? I'll put the ball on the cone, and that's my job. You know, the next person can come along and see if they can kick the goal.
yeah.
But I'm just going to, I'm going to do the very hard thing, and I'm going to put the ball on the cone.
Yeah.
It expects that it's going to get finished by other movies. Like, pretty much all the other, like, the original trilogy. You could watch, like, A New Hope or Empire Strikes Back or even Last Jedi on their own, and they're solid movies. Like, they can stand on their own. Obviously, they work best as a trilogy. But ultimately, they don't rely on each other to fix plot holes.
Yep.
Or to fix any kind of... Like, you don't have anything that could be, let's say, anything mentioned in A New Hope or Empire Strikes Back that you can't kind of try to explain without, like, you're not expecting to wait till the next movie to find out why.
Yeah.
The only one, and there's only really one, which is obviously the reveal of Vader being Luke's father.
Yeah. And the brother-sister Leia thing
Yeah,
is
but
kind
that
of
was-
explained in Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, like that wasn't expected. They didn't just drop that and be like, okay, we'll explain that in some random movies in 30 years' time.
Yeah.
But like,
We'll release a comic book series.
yeah, like and that's the main problem
one
with,
cares
with
about.
the sequel trilogy. They rely too much heavily on external media outside the movies, essentially just to please the nerds. Because the movies, they know the movies are going to make money, but like the nerds are just going to complain if something doesn't make sense, and you can make them for the most part shut up if
you
you
do the
fix
comic.
it in
you
a
do
random comic or
10-page comic.
in a random episode of a cartoon show.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just remember when Baby Yoda force healed somebody, like literally like a week before The Rise of Skywalker came out in The Mandalorian.
And then Ray force healed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, it's a real thing all along.
It's kind of, it's funny how I find it funny how in The Mandalorian everyone's just like, oh cool, he can force heal. But then when Ray does it, everyone's just like, bullshit. Why couldn't Obi-Wan do that to Qui-Gon or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it doesn't work either way. But
Yeah,
just,
but like
just
just
the
the
fact,
way people reacted to it is funny.
the funny thing is just the fact that Baby Yoda like literally did that like a week before
Yeah.
The Rise of Skywalker. So they did it
that
deliberately.
episode
That's
came out
crazy.
literally a week before, like
Yeah.
1 or 2
Like,
weeks
oh,
before.
this is canon. You know, Baby Yoda's cute, right? You accept that.
You guys remember Baby Yoda,
Yeah,
right?
don't forget that this is a weird power that's never been used before and completely breaks the whole universe. It's like the Force Dash. You know, George Lucas had the decency to only do it once and never do it
Force
When
again.
did they
Dash.
use the Force Dash?
The Phantom Menace, they use it
Oh,
once.
yeah.
When was? Oh, that was
Call
when they got
yourself
away
a
from
Star Wars
the-
fan if you don't know
Was
Force
that-
Dash.
I couldn't. Is that when they got away from the droid?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
At one
They just
time.
like teleported.
Yeah.
And I'm just, I think
And they never
it's
do it
such a
ever again.
weird. That's so. I remember that. That's such a weird scene.
Yep.
Just,
That's essentially what the Force Dash is.
Yeah. It breaks the universe, but they never use it again because
what are they? Neo just
they
dodging
acknowledge
bullets.
that. I think.
Yeah.
Anyway, give me the worst thing or worst scene,
I
worst
think Nick's already talked about his, hasn't
Yeah.
he? Or
What was mine?
I think you just maybe went off.
you kind of
mine.
just built
Yeah.
off his.
Yeah, I built
I
up
think you got the
yours.
same.
If I was to say a worst scene,
You can say the same one.
yeah, but I'd honestly say I want to try to do something different, so we're not saying the same thing again. Honestly, it would be the Ray's interrogation from Kylo
That's a good
Like-
one.
Ren. The acting from
Daisy Ridley,
no
Adam Driver.
Adam Driver is like he's trying. You could tell, and Daisy Ridley is
Just
like,
makes it look bad.
It kind of looks like Daisy Ridley's looked at what Oscar Isaac did
Yeah.
and is trying to replicate it.
Her
Like she
facial
was watching
expressions just really
watching him
off.
do that, and then she's just trying to. She's trying to look constipated, like,
Angry eyes.
and
It's
she's
the
really
teeth,
weird.
though.
She shows both of her rows of teeth. She does it
Yeah.
a lot, especially when she's running for some reason.
Yeah.
And like,
Imagine running through like a sand dune and having your mouth open,
gotta
like
gotta
bro,
catch
all
all
the
that
sand
dust, get all the
in
protein.
your teeth,
It's
bro.
not ideal. Yeah.
But and then it's ultimately like outside the acting, just ultimately the point of the scene shows the pure ineptitude of Kylo,
Yeah.
or just how or just trying to show how powerful Rey is. someone who has never had any force training being able to resist someone like Kylo, who was able to break a trained soldier like Poe, pretty easily. Like, it's so out of nowhere. It'd be like if Darth Maul tried to do the same thing to Anakin.
Yep.
Like, it feels the same. Like, it feels like if Anakin was able to resist that kind of thing, say from Maul, it wouldn't have made sense because he's untrained. It doesn't matter who his parents are.
Yeah.
Like
That's why
Luke
they
said
got
in The
rid of him
Mandalorian,
in the
training
Phantom
is like talent is nothing. What was it? Power is.
Talent is nothing without training.
Yeah, I think that's it.
That's the line in The Mandalorian,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, like that kind of concept. And then Rey sort of just throws that kind of like, I know it came after, but Rey sort of, when you take into account Rey, she just throws that out the window
Yep.
because she never loses.
That's the problem. You found it. Yeah. Yeah. We also never figure out how Kylo Ren got his name. Like, what is Kylo Ren? What is the Knights of Ren?
The Knights of Ren is a good point.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Are they related to Kylo Ren? I don't know. I'm getting off
Close.
track here, but
It's super cool guy name.
cool guy band.
Princess Leia's like, Ben, get down. It's like, no, my name is Kylo Ren. You'll refer to me as Kylo Ren, mother.
No, Mum, I'm Kylo now.
He's like a goth face.
And black hair.
Black suit.
We can talk a lot about the vision for the franchise and the fact that there was nothing that number 8 and number 9 took from number 7. They essentially just threw all of the ideas down the drain and just kind of moved on. But you have to pay attention to number 7 as a standalone movie. This movie set up a lot of stuff. To me, it had a clear vision of what was going to happen. It had characters that needed to be explored that could have easily been explored in number 8 and number 9. It's just the writing just wasn't there in the final 2, unfortunately. So the writing's not actually the biggest issue for me in this. I think it had pretty clear ideas. I would say the biggest issue, like I mentioned before, is this sort of weird intersplicing between Finn and Rey, where they both are kind of maybe Force users trying to wield the same lightsaber. Is Rey the main character? Is Finn the main character? What's going on there? We don't really get a clear indication when we finish the movie of what the next one's going to be about. Who's the main character in the next one? It probably leans more to Rey, but it should be defiantly clear as to what the main character is. And to me, it's kind of both. It should have been one or the other, or they should have just handled it a lot better. They just kind of decided to just kind of shove John Boyega to the side, which is such a shame, man, because that, like we've been saying, the character has so much potential. It's just wasted potential is what this whole franchise is. Sorry, what the whole sequel trilogy is.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, on that note, I think we will go to some final thoughts. But before we do that, we'll just quickly mention the music segment in terms of songs going into the Rewatch playlist on Spotify. You want to take this one, Jaden?
Yep. So the Rewatch playlist is essentially a playlist on Spotify that you can access via the description of the video, or you can just search it up. It's the Rewatch playlist. It'll be on all of our social medias. And essentially what it is we add minimum 1, max 2 songs every week, or should I say every episode of the Rewatch podcast. And it's essentially our 2 or 1 favorite track from each movie. So this week we decided to put in Rey's theme, which to me is just wins. It's like easily the best theme in this movie. But Kylo Ren's theme is also really good. It's not called Kylo Ren's theme. I think it's called the First Order March or something. But that's also really good. I think that's also a really good theme. It's like essentially Kylo Ren's motif is what it is. When Kylo Ren pops up, that theme pops up. They should have just called it Kylo Ren's theme.
It's kind of like how the Imperial marches to Vader.
Yeah. Maybe they were just going for that.
Mm.
Yeah. I mean, that's essentially what this whole movie is. It's just copying New Hope.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're the two movies that we added this week. And now we'll move on to final thoughts.
Okay. Who wants to kick us off?
I'm happy to go first if you guys want to think about.
Go on then.
Okay, look, I think I'm going to be the more biased end of this sort of spectrum going on here. I really enjoy The Force Awakens for what it was. I enjoyed it on release day. I still enjoy it. I think it's a fun movie. It doesn't make much sense in hindsight in terms of where the trilogy took it. I think it has some good ideas. I think it has some good characters. It's just a bit unoriginal, is what it is. It was a safe play by J.J. Abrams. He said he wanted to do bigger and better things, and he kind of just took the easy route. I think John Williams just absolutely killed it again. I think the cinematography is really good, which we had a good chat about. I think there's a lot of elements going on here that had serious potential going for it. And you have to analyze this film as a solo film. Like that's what we try to do, at least on this podcast. And for that, I mean, I really enjoy this film. I've watched it so many times. It's probably one of my most watched movies, to be honest. I really enjoy it. I know it's not as good as, the OG trilogy, but I still really enjoy it. So I think I'm going to go for a B. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I say higher than I was expecting. I think.
No, I think the B's good.
Yeah.
Go on then, Nick. What do you reckon? Go on.
I want to be really harsh to this movie, mainly because of what comes up. Like,
we go from A to F, by the way, so you got all the range there.
Without the E's.
Even...
I'm joking. Anyway.
That's reserved for the last year.
I kind of want to save it for the last bit, but I want to be harsh on this movie, but then again, it's not really its fault for what the rest of the trilogy did. Ultimately, it did try to set something genuine up, but in its own film, it did fall flat in a lot of areas.
Yep.
Like it seemed to focus on trying to set up things for other movies rather than making a complete movie that you can just watch and then you pretty much get anything, and there might be a couple questions in the end.
Yeah.
But ultimately, that's where it falls flat for me. Like visually, in terms of cinematography, it is a beautiful movie. Has some genuinely great shots. Acting, for the most part, I think is pretty good. There's a few core actors that do fall flat. Mm-hmm. But you can sort of blame that more on the writing rather than like that. You can tell especially for some things they weren't really given much.
Sure.
But yeah, ultimately,
just honest opinion.
It's, if anything, I'd give it more around like a C+. Like, it's above average for me, but barely.
Okay.
Like I can watch it, and there's a lot of great scenes that I might even just go on YouTube and just watch a certain scene.
Yep.
But it does have its redeeming qualities, but it does have a lot that drags it back.
That's a lot higher than I thought it was going to be. I know Sam's going to absolutely blast this movie.
I kind of want to save my absolute tearing apart.
Go ahead.
Another movie. But I do enjoy it, but if anything, I'd be tearing apart because of what comes after it, rather than what it is.
Yeah.
So
and that's
I try not to be biased because of what a certain director did.
Yeah.
But yeah, as a C+, it's a fun movie, just to turn your brain off and watch. But you can't. It's not a movie that you're going to invest. While you're watching it, you're going to invest all your attention to. Mm-hmm. It's not like a Dark Knight or anything else along that kind of spectrum. Mm-hmm. It doesn't demand a lot from you, which it's kind of all it is, just like an action movie in the end. But yeah, what do you think, Sam?
Okay. Well,
it's just going downhill.
So for me, I take all those points. I'm not going to rate this movie in terms of is Ray a good character? and let's rate The Force Awakens on whether, the journey was worth it, right? But let's look at other trilogies. Let's look at Batman Begins. Let's look at A New Hope. Let's look at, Rise of the Planet of the Apes.
Which I don't really like, but
No, it's a lot better than this.
okay.
I haven't seen that before.
What are some other trilogies? Let's look at the first Rocky. Let's look at the first Cars.
Transformers.
Transformers, no, get that out of here. The first Toy Story movie. All of those movies are movies in their own right, and a trilogy came afterwards, right? So I think it's only really fair to compare it to like Star Wars movies or the Dark Knight trilogy is probably one of the best ones, because it was 3 movies and that was all. There's no spin-offs, there's no anything else. You can set up a trilogy while also being like a solid film in your own right. And I don't think this film is a solid film at all. I feel like it's paper thin, like if you're not demanding much of it, sure, you can probably, get across, a paper thin bridge. But if you look down for a second, or if you take too long to get across, you're going to fall through. It's not going to hold, it's not going to support you.
It's not going to hold the $200 million budget that it's got going through.
Well, it's not going to hold fan expectations either.
Yeah.
Those are huge for Star Wars, and I get the fact that it's impossible to please such a Star Wars fan base, but
especially when you've got a fan base that once your movie's out and everyone's calmed down, they will rip it to shreds. They'll look for any little detail they can tear apart.
Yeah, for sure. But this could have been a lot better. If there's no vision here from watching this singular movie. I can't pinpoint J.J. Abrams' style. I can't pinpoint his vision and what he wants to do with these characters. I agree with you guys that there are some characters that have interesting sort of like starting points here. But from scene to scene, there's no connective tissue that binds all of this together. It's Star Wars in the sense that Han Solo's here quipping to Chewbacca, and that's fantastic. But there's no other Star Wars elements. I don't feel Star Wars when they walk into that fake cantina scene and there's lots of creatures around. I just think, oh, this is like the cantina scene in the first Star Wars movie. J.J. Abrams, it feels like you just ripped off A New Hope in some sort of...
Are you talking to J.J. Abrams personally here?
He's watching.
Oh God, man.
If you're listening, J.J. Abrams, I feel like you ripped off A New Hope as some sort of like, this was better than the prequels, so let's just do that again. But we expect better, and personally, I'm very surprised that you still get employed in Hollywood, because
to be fair, they only care about how much money you make, not the quality of your...
Yeah, but then let's look at the Rise of Skywalker. I mean, it's clearly, it suffered from the fact that this movie didn't have a vision. There's no supportive tissue behind this movie, and there's no denseness, there's no detail.
Yep.
A good story for another time. This whole movie is a bloody trailer for a trilogy that we never got. It's lifeless. There's got no passion from the director or the producers or anyone in that top management story level that is involved.
Yeah, what you got was a weird bit of fan fiction and a weird straight to DVD movie.
Look, I think
that's essentially what it is.
This movie can be flashy and it can look great and looks fantastic, but at the end of the day, there's nothing behind this movie. I'm going to give it... Look, personally, I think Attack of the Clones is a far better movie than this. And I gave Attack of the Clones recently. I watched it and I put it on Letterboxd as a 2.5 star, I think. It only just got there for me because Attack of the Clones, while it fails in pacing and lots of other things, and my goodness, lots of other things, it's honest and it has a vision and it knows where it wants to go and it answers questions. You don't leave Attack of the Clones asking, oh, who's Anakin? Who's Padme? Who's Obi-Wan? Because that's not what it's about. The movie gives you enough so that you're satisfied by the end of the movie and you can go, okay, that was a film. I watched it, and now I can, now I can go and do something else. Whereas you watch this movie and you think, oh, I have to watch the next one now because what the hell why do I care about this? It doesn't make you care about it. So I'm going to give it a D, and I consider it a D minus, but I think giving a D plus D minus, it sort of gets a bit pedantic when you get towards the lower scale. I'm looking forward into, the future. We're going to be doing The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker, and I think those are worse movies. So I want to save, the E's and the F categories.
Well, E's don't exist.
Do you go straight from a D to
So
an F?
it's D minus to F.
Okay. Well, let me give this a solid D then, because I want to reserve at least 2 spots, because there are 2 movies to come, and both of them are worse than this movie. I'd much rather watch this movie than those movies, but there's a reason why I haven't revisited this movie, and there's no substance. I haven't said a single positive thing apart from the cinematography on the podcast. So, yeah, I'm not a fan of this movie anymore. J.J. Abrams, he's a hack. I mean, he hasn't deserved to be employed, let alone be paid millions of dollars.
He made Cloverfield. That's such an amazing movie.
Haven't watched it. It may be good, but if you can't do Star Wars, then just go home.
Don't.
Okay. Well, any closing thoughts? Nick, are you going to come back for The Last Jedi?
Do I have to?
Look, it's a free country.
Is it?
Twitter's a free speech platform now. It's a
time I
different
checked,
world.
Yes. Yeah, you can post about the unknown virus of unspecified origin on Twitter now, and you don't get flagged for it.
Am I going to blame a certain country for it and not get banned?
You don't get like the, how it's like, click on this to get more information. Like this, you can post whatever you want.
Official COVID warning.
Yeah, exactly. None of
No,
that.
we can't talk about it.
Anyway, so you're coming back for The Last Jedi, yes or no? Suffer through it with us.
Depends on how much I hate myself that week.
It'll be a few weeks.
Keep in
away.
mind, you do have to watch the movie.
Yeah.
It's not just the
You'll
chat
have
about
to
it.
suffer. Yeah, you've got to
That's going to be
commit.
a struggle. I'm going to get a lot of rums out for that.
Yeah, might have to be an intoxicated podcast.
Good thing. Can we play a drinking game when we watch it?
What?
Record the podcast.
Every bad scene, take a shot, and then
Every time we see a really bad character moment, we take a shot.
He's constantly drinking.
Good thing I got a full bottle of Jack Daniels on my desk.
I think you'll need a few more.
Yeah, we need a few bottles. All right, well, we'll leave it there for today. We won't do The Last Jedi straight away. We'll do some other movies first, but it is concerning, having to have that on the docket, to come.
But I think there'll be fun chats.
Oh, yeah, I'm very interested to chat about it, but...
Yeah, if anything, I'm more excited for Rise of Skywalker, because I've only seen that once.
Same.
I've seen that, I think, 3 times.
When I first saw it, I was like, I kind of liked it. It was like, I was very on the fence. It was very, I honestly really liked Kylo in it. Like, I felt like he actually had development out of everyone. And the scenes with, like, Rey, Poe, and Finn were pretty, I thought, actually seeing them together.
Yep. Yeah, quite good.
And, seeing them fly, that was pretty cool.
They fly now.
Okay. Fly now.
Well, I look forward to all of those discussions. I think they'll be really interesting to at least have a chat about them. Watching them is going to be the tough part. But until then, we'll say bye for now. Thanks for coming on, Nick.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
We'll catch you guys later.
Yep.